I just wanted to come on here and say thank you to subscribers, for everyone who's been subscribing to me. And also thank you for all the kind comments lately. So on my channel, predominantly on my bedtime stories, for some reason, over the last few weeks, there's been a lot of random kind comments about how the videos have helped you, how the videos have helped you to fall asleep, have helped with other problems. So there's been people sharing about having pain or having different problems that the videos aren't necessarily designed to help with, and how the videos have helped that. Hi. And so I've tried to reply to everyone. When anyone comments, I try to reply and say anything else that's a reply. But I just wanted to make a video as well, because sometimes there's no comments. So sometimes I go through a stage where my videos just don't get that many comments. I might get maybe 1 or 2 comments a day, and those comments might just be thank you for this video or something, and so I just like it and don't do much else. But there's been whole paragraphs, quite big comments lately, so I wanted to thank everyone for that. I'm a bit late getting out a bedtime story. I had planned to do a bedtime story when I passed 24,000 subscribers. I passed that the other day, but have been really busy. Haven't had a chance to get the video done yet. One thing I did, which I don't know if it will work out, so I don't know if I will post it live here or post it here on my channel, is cool. One thing, I'll read that in a second. One thing that I did was I have started, I've got an old, if you bear with me turning my back to you a second. I've got an old copy from 1896. This is going to be probably backwards to you on there, I don't know, of the Iliad and the Odyssey. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be a fun thing to read that to camera for anyone who wants to listen to the Iliad and the Odyssey at bedtime. But it's very long, obviously. It's, I think, 800 and something pages long. So I made the first video of that. I read, it's divided into books. So in the book is books for the Iliad and then books for the Odyssey. And so I read all the books for, I read book 1 even of the Iliad. So that's what the inside of this looks like. I quite like this. I like old books. I have a lot of old books. So I read book 1. It took me an hour to read book 1. So just up to where you saw the bookmark there. Took me an hour to read that. So I have to listen to it back, see if it's good enough to post, if people don't mind me having a few errors in it. I'm not particularly good at being able to say Greek names and things and Greek places, especially not in real time, just kind of flicking through and reading, trying to keep it live. So I recorded reading the entire thing, book 1. So for a whole hour, I just sat and recorded myself talking through the whole thing. Yes, people do say that I say, oh, if you like this, give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you're not subscribed. And I say all that jazz at the beginning because I hope people are asleep at the end of the videos. And so the last thing I want is to say, that's it, fall asleep and wake up. It's time now to subscribe and like my video. So I don't like doing it at the end, obviously. But doing it at the beginning, some people comment saying, I don't know if I like your story. I don't know if I like it enough to give it a thumbs up. I'm asleep in 5 minutes. I think people still give it a thumbs up because obviously it sent them to sleep, which is kind of what they are probably listening to it for. But yeah, a lot of people say that they get put out like a light very quickly, and so they can't actually remember what any of the stories are. Yeah. So if people are interested, I'll probably share the video I recorded the other day of me doing the first book of the Iliad. I think the Iliad is something like 24 books long, as in 24 sections. There's no obligation to like my videos. Also, subscribing is quite nice, but there's no obligation to like them. It's just that if you do like it, it's handy. And if I don't remind people, people just listen to it and don't think about it. But then sometimes someone commented saying, you asked me to like your video, so I'm giving it a thumbs down. And they hadn't watched the video. That was their choice, but that's up to them. Yeah, where was I? So yeah, so I recorded the Iliad, the book 1 of the Iliad, which took me an hour. So at that rate, given there's something like 22 books for the Iliad and then another 22 or something for the Odyssey, it's going to be like 44 hours or something long by the time I've finished recording the whole lot. But I've never done that. And one reason I've chosen an old 1890s copy of the Iliad is because then it's outside of copyright. If I picked up a modern version and tried to read it, even though the stories themselves are old, very old, sort of 2,500 years old stories or whatever it is, and obviously orally they go back even further than that. So even though the stories are really old, how copyright works is that the person who wrote that item, that book, is the copyright holder. So someone who wrote, say, their version of the Iliad in 2012 or something, that would be in copyright under their name. But it's also something a bit different. I don't know if people will like it, because reading the Iliad, it's like reading Shakespeare. It kind of makes no sense when you're listening to it. Or to me, it makes no sense when you're listening to it. You kind of need to absorb it, and you need to listen to enough of it. So one risk is that I will send people to sleep reading it, because I've tried to read it in a relaxing way rather than a really lively way, because again, I want it to fit with the idea of bedtime stories and stuff, but reading a bedtime story, so to speak, rather than just me putting a camera on me and talking, which is how I normally do it. I do exactly what I'm doing here. I turn a camera on, I face the camera, and then I talk, and the bedtime story comes out my mouth. And then perhaps half an hour or an hour later, I reach the end and stop talking, and then I turn it all off, and then I edit it and upload it. So that's kind of how I do it. I don't obviously read a script or anything, or I just do it to camera. So it's a bit weird having to read a book and trying to fit to that idea of doing it. It's a bit unusual, especially when you're reading a book for a solid hour out loud. Anyone who's done like working with kids or anything, or perhaps parents who read to their kids, if you read something for a long period of time, your eyes kind of almost glaze over trying to follow the pages and trying to follow the words and everything, and it's really hard to do. So I've tried that. I will get a story done for the 24,000 subscriber thing when I get an opportunity. I've got to start thinking about what to do for next year. Every year I try and think by now what kind of thing, sort of November-ish, what kind of thing I want to do for the next year, what kind of goals I want to have for the next year. So most people, whenever I say, oh, do you set New Year's resolutions? Most people say no. And I can understand why people don't bother. But for me, I'm autistic. I love structure. I love knowing what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it. And so ever since being a very small child, I've always written goals down, and then I've always achieved the majority of the goals that I've written down. So one year I decided to do something different and said, I'm going to, instead of writing down, do these 10 different things across the year, I just wrote down, do four new things every month. And that was it. That was my goal. So it was a vague goal, but a goal. So I had something specific to focus on. And I think I did 60 something different things by the end of that year, including writing about 10 books. So I always set goals. And with my YouTube channel, I've gone from one year I was posting a video 5 days a week as a minimum. And then any ideas I had around that, I'd post them as well. But I'd have 5 days a week of posting videos. That was a lot of hard work, to try and post 5 days a week on a channel that doesn't make me a living, and made me even less of a living back then. So I did that, and then I cut down. I thought the next year, I thought, oh, that was really hard work. 5 days a week of YouTubing. Don't know how vloggers do it. I used to vlog back in 2007, 2008. So I'm laughing and no one knows what I'm laughing at. I'm reading the comments. So yeah, I used to vlog back in like 2007, 2008 when I started on YouTube. I'd have just my phone, and it would have like 240 pixel camera on it, and I'd walk down the street saying, oh look, there's a cat there, and I'd be showing cats, and I'd be walking down streets and saying, listen to this out in the country, you know, listen to the birds, and nothing particularly inspiring, just me saying this is what I'm getting up to every day. My wife said, that's stupid. Who would watch a random person walking around just saying this is what I'm getting up to in my everyday life? So I stopped doing it because I thought, you're right, who would be interested in that? Stupidly, I stopped doing it, and then it became a bit of a craze. And now I don't feel I could start. It's a bit of a weird thing, I think. But where was I? I had a point I was making. See, this is another problem I have. I go off on a tangent and forget what I'm talking about. So yeah, so I make every year I make New Year's resolutions. I dropped from 5 videos a week minimum to 3 videos a week minimum the following year, to 1 video a week, and to 1 video a week, which is what I've been doing for the last year, where I've posted 4 different types of videos. So this is 1 video a week minimum. I do post other videos like I'm here now. This is obviously an extra video. It's Friday. Yeah. So a video went out live at 3 o'clock. So 6 minutes ago. So I post 4 different types of videos at the moment, but I've had a lot of comments from people when I've talked about things saying, we don't want you to keep posting all your autism videos. We don't want you to keep posting all your videos about teaching hypnosis. We just want bedtime stories. We don't want anything else that you do. And yet the bit I'm passionate about, if I can get passionate about something, is promoting autism awareness and saying, look, you can actually achieve things when you're autistic, helping parents and families to be aware, and employers to be aware that autistic people shouldn't just be written off. Obviously, parents love their children, but you have a problem with your child, say they're misbehaving, they're struggling in school, whatever it happens to be, and you then go to the doctor saying, there's something's wrong with my child. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. The doctor refers the child for an autism assessment or whatever, and the assessment happens, and the parent's told they're autistic. It's a lifelong thing. You're born autistic, you're going to die autistic. So what a parent hears is those problems that your child is experiencing, your child has for life. And I don't know what it's like in the rest of the world, but in the UK, there's a lot of cuts to health services. So what ends up happening is that you essentially get sent away as a parent, and that's the end of your support, unless you are a parent who's good at fighting for support and fighting for help everywhere. And so the difficulty is that then you get a parent who thinks, my child can't socialize, my child can't, struggles with empathizing, struggles with, constantly says the wrong thing or does the wrong things, struggles with getting anxious and getting angry. And the parent sees all that, which is true, there is all that, but doesn't see that the child perhaps is brilliant at noticing patterns, and so would be great at certain types of jobs and certain future opportunities if they can channel that and learn the skills required to fit around that ability they've got sort of innately for them. So, what I like focusing on, and my professional work, I've spent I've talked about this occasionally on YouTube, but my professional work, I've spent most of it working with autistic people as well as being autistic. And so that's always been a kind of passion of mine, or a focus on helping people to see the positives, see the benefits, and learn how to nurture and bring that out. So as I say, parents aren't uncaring, obviously. It's that parents don't necessarily, you're in a hectic life, you've got to perhaps do school runs and may have more than one child, and you've got all this stuff going on. It's very hard to find a way of, or even think about, I'm going to go and do some research now. I'd love to go and buy a bunch of books, not knowing which ones are the best ones to buy, all on autism, and sit at home when I'm exhausted at midnight and read all these books to learn about autism and how I can help my child. So you don't know what books to buy, and then you read them and have to try and figure it out for yourself. So that's always been my kind of how I can, where I'd like to focus. But it's something that, and that's where I'd like to focus next year. But it's something that I know a lot of people. Oh, it's good to see Harvey here. Every couple of, see, I'm stopping halfway through. I'll try and keep a mental note of where I was at. Harvey, every couple of years, I didn't pay attention initially. I think he posted on a video, the quit smoking video. Oh, this helped me. And then, thumbs up, great. Glad it helped kind of comment. And then I think it was a year later or something, he posted either on YouTube or Facebook or somewhere. It's 1 year since this helped. And then I think Harvey posted the next year or maybe the year after, and then moved on to posting every couple of years. And then suddenly it's like you'd get a 10 years ago, you helped me with this, which is quite nice to get feedback that something you've done has been helpful to someone. Especially when you're always trying to look as a YouTuber, or if you're an author, or if you're anywhere where you're interacting with the public, really, in this kind of context, especially with social media where people can be anonymous, you're always trying to look for the little positive bits that keep you motivated in the kind of world of negativity. Like, I've deleted a bunch of negative comments today. I'm not going to repeat them because there's a lot of swear words in them about me being me that I've had on my YouTube channel or my videos, and comments to other people who've commented on my videos as well, sort of abusive comments. And I just sort of go through and try and delete them before people get a chance to read them, unless it's something that I think it's not too rude and it's only offending me or something. Then I might leave it, because obviously I don't want to totally edit my public image of what people see on my channel. It's only where people are very abusive or something. So it's quite nice when you suddenly see a comment saying, this many years ago, that really, really helped me. Because it obviously makes you sort of feel good and think, oh, good. At least someone's actually getting some benefit from the videos. So all the sleep videos, obviously, they're all done, as I've regularly talked about. I don't like making the sleep videos. I find it really stressful. I'm very good at telling stories in that kind of way when there's a client sat in front of me and I'm creating it for the client. And so the content I'm using is the client, the metaphors they've given me in conversation about their problem. I've got obviously a course teaching how to do this. So I'm very good at doing it like that. But when you're just looking at a blank screen, or into a blank camera, and you're going to try and create a story, but you've got nothing at all in your head to use, and yet you've got to now talk for an hour or something, but you don't know what you're going to talk about. That's so difficult to do all the time. So like when I did my so when I didn't get my when I did the 40 stories for my birthday, I did in the summer 40 days worth of bedtime stories, and that was very, very difficult to do, to come up with 40 unique stories, because I don't want people to just think, oh, every story is essentially the same. I want people to think, well, that's a bit different. And so I add twists and turns, and they go in really weird directions. And I try to make it so that hopefully no one ever really knows what to expect from any of the stories. But that is really, really hard to do. So doing 40 of them took me hundreds of hours, and I knew by about the 10th story that I wasn't going to do that again. It also negatively impacted on my channel. My rate of subscribers suddenly plummeted, and my views suddenly plummeted. I think because a lot of people jumped ship. So even though I said beforehand in a live video similar to this, I said I'm going to be posting 40 stories. It's only going to be for 40 days. Don't worry about it. You know, after the 40 days, everything's back to normal. So if you don't like getting in your inbox, or if you click the bell icon thing, or on your, if you don't subscribe to many channels, on your thing that says the channels you subscribe to and what videos have come up, if you don't want to see a whole bunch of Dan Jones videos, I said just wait 40 days and it'll be, my videos will be back to normal anyway. But yeah, that I think really annoyed people that I posted a video every single day again. So yeah, so I've got to decide, and it'd be handy to have ideas from you guys, what you think I should do for next year. I'm just reading comments as well. Listening to me for 12 years, that's a very long time. Trying to think, I was on MySpace before I came onto YouTube, and I know there's some people who followed me from MySpace onto YouTube. I kind of mentioned on MySpace, oh, I'm going to this YouTube thing, going to give it a go. And so I came over here and started doing YouTube videos. And in the early days, as I say, I was doing little vlog videos. I was doing a lot of hypnosis training type videos. One thing, in those days, YouTube videos could only be 10 minutes long. So I was having to, any longer videos, like even my quit smoking process, I used to have to do it in 3 parts and then put it in a playlist and hope that the person listening would select it to listen to in a playlist as all 3 parts, because or else you would get like the first third of a quit smoking process and then nothing. And so obviously you want the whole smoking process. So I did. I was just reading that the trolls need cookies and milk and a good night's sleep. And so yeah, so where I'd like to focus next year is largely on promoting autism awareness and continuing to do that. I'd love to obviously have my channel grow quicker, as anyone would. Because the more the channel grows, the more money I can make from the channel, which means the more time I can give to the channel, because the less money I have to make from other things. So currently I have to give most of my time to the things that make me an income, while also trying to do things like writing books, which don't make me an income while I'm writing them. And then they don't make me much money when I've written them either. But I have to write books, and I don't have to. I choose to write books, including, as many of you will know, the bedtime stories book. I've transcribed 20 of my bedtime stories that are here on the YouTube channel. And in the beginning of it, as many of you would know, in the acknowledgements, obviously, I put as many, I put at that point in time, the 150 subscribers who had most commented over the last kind of 3 months or whatever it was, or 2 months prior to writing the book. So, because obviously, if it wasn't for you guys, the book wouldn't exist, because I wouldn't bother making all the stories. I've always made stories for myself, sort of short stories that help me to sleep, or long stories sometimes to help me to sleep. But I've never really thought that others would be that interested in hypnotic bedtime stories or anything like that. Yes, some people I think would love to just have me post as much as I can, and they would listen regardless. I've had some people say they'd love a new story every day, but unless my channel, I think I said this probably a year or something ago in a video where someone said something like that, and I said if my YouTube channel was making a living, I would obviously happily be focusing on it for a living, and would be then putting, happily doing a video every day, because I could put sort of 5-10 hours a day into my YouTube channel rather than having to put whatever I do now, 60 hours a week or something, into working on other stuff and then squeezing YouTube around it. Yeah, there were some people that commented on, I think, nearly every single video when I did the 40 videos back to back, 40 days. And those 40 videos, I still posted my videos every Friday. So there were 40 extra videos. I still posted videos every Friday. And every time I passed 1,000 new subscribers during the time that those 40 videos were going live, I created a video for a bedtime story for each of them as well, each time I passed 1,000. So I think I made 44 bedtime stories in that time period. Yeah, I left YouTube back in 2011 initially. And so I was on YouTube from January 2007. In 2011, on my channel, it had a little thing saying I was 33rd most viewed guru or some such thing. And my videos were regularly trending in the top 100 how-to videos, because a lot of them were teaching how to do hypnosis, or there's not really a space for things like my bedtime stories. So I put them under how-to, because it's kind of how to fall asleep. That's kind of my way of trying to figure out how to categorize it. And my channel was doing really well. And as I said to someone the other day, I posted one of my stories that I had, the original Deep Trance Experience track, had something like 750,000 views, and my channel was really doing very well at that point, for that time on YouTube as well. But the better my channel was doing, the more trolls I got, and the more you have to deal with everyone constantly saying how much they hate you and hate what you're doing and how horrible you are, and how you should get a life and you should leave YouTube, and saying much worse stuff than that with lots of swear words in, and how a lot of the hypnotherapy community, unfortunately, were angry that I was sharing educational hypnosis videos, and they were commenting very aggressively, and then getting their their students to come and comment on my videos as well with horrible comments, to try and get me to take down all my hypnotherapy training videos that were trying to sort of demystify hypnotherapy and teach some inductions and all these sort of things. And so it just reached a point where in 2011, I think sort of August or something, 2011, I thought, I'll sod this. I don't get any money for this. I'm posting every week to try and be helpful, and instead I'm getting abuse. So although there were sort of a consistent stream of people who liked the videos, I deleted about 600 of my videos off of YouTube, just left a handful, probably about 100 or something, and gave up YouTube until pretty much 2015-ish. So every now and then I'd get like, oh, I'll share that, and I'd get an idea and I'd want to share a video and I'd post a video, but I didn't do it consistently between 2011 and I think 2016 or something, or 2015, something like that. And so then I came back and thought, right, I'm older now, a lot older now. So I thought, I'm older now. Does it really matter if all of my fellow hypnotherapy community, well, not all of them, but the ones that are online that were being very vocal, if they all hate me doing this, does it really matter to me? some of them were people who I had previously respected quite highly, and it turned out they're not who you think they are, and or how you think they are. So I suddenly kind of thought, do I really need to worry about them and listen to them? The reason I was doing all this sharing information was because you can do it for free. And when I was growing up and I was 13 and I didn't understand anyone in the world around me, everyone's weird and confusing, and hypnosis transformed my life. But I didn't have access to any books or anything. So, you know, there are a lot of hypnosis books are really expensive, and so I couldn't find anything other than a few self-hypnosis books. So obviously, with the advent of YouTube in 2006 or whenever it was that I heard about it, I thought, well, this is the thing that allows me to share the stuff I wish someone had told me when I was a kid. That would have been really helpful to start learning back then what I know now. So that's why I then started on YouTube and started sharing all this free stuff. But there's a lot of people who make a lot of money out of hypnosis courses and things who were saying, why would anyone ever take our courses if you're giving it all away on YouTube for free? And I was doing streaming live events at the time, not on YouTube, but I was uploading them to YouTube, but I was streaming them with a service called Stickam. And I was holding workshops back in 2004 through to 2007-ish, holding workshops and streaming them live across the internet. And I was using my PlayStation 3, which had PlayStation 3 at home, and I was holding courses on there, teaching stuff using microphone and having a room that people would meet in, and I would teach hypnosis on there. So I was doing a lot of kind of internet and that kind of teaching, and then and obviously what now would be webinars, but I'd never heard of that term back then. And it just struck me as odd that you'd be attacked by people who are allegedly caring, rather than have them say, yeah, we get this. We think that you should offer stuff for free, because if someone wants a qualification, they can take a course. So let's have a look at the comments. Yeah, there is so much to listen to. People comment saying things like, so new people to the channel, I get comments on, someone will discover a video somewhere and they'll say, wow, I love this video, it helped me fall asleep. Definitely do more of these. And they don't realize I've got 99 more over on my channel if you just click through to the videos tab. I've got them all in a playlist, but I don't recommend listening to them in the playlist, because obviously YouTube will stick ads at the beginning of some of them, and if you're asleep, if it's in a playlist, you'll get an ad most likely at some point. And if it's anything like my experience with YouTube, the ad will probably be an action thriller film that's really loud just after you've fallen asleep. So you don't want to do that. And obviously I start every video talking to camera, just sort of say subscribe, like, etc., because I don't want to do it at the end of the video. So they're in the playlist so they can be easily found, but they're obviously not in the playlist with the idea that you listen to the playlist back to back. I seem to have problems uploading really long videos on YouTube. So there's currently one video that's a compilation of, I think, 10 or so, 20, no, more than that, 28, I think, of my bedtime stories back to back. So you can listen to that, and you potentially could just pause it, and then next time you go to bed, play it again and carry on. But it's 14.5 hours long of bedtime stories that you can listen to just continuously all night long if you wanted. And there's an introduction by me at the beginning, just saying, if you find this video interesting, etc., all that rubbish. There's that at the very beginning, but then there's no ads that will play through it, because I don't have the video set for ads to play through it. So YouTube might put an ad at the beginning, but it won't put ads in the middle of it. And it means essentially you can then listen to back-to-back bedtime stories without interruption and without me talking between them or anything. So that's somewhere on my channel as well. So there is a lot to listen to. Yes, I've got 16 online courses teaching hypnotherapy and related subjects. So teaching self-publishing, teaching how to do hypnotherapy, sort of basic stuff through to more advanced stuff, teaching how to treat depression, how to treat phobias and post-traumatic stress disorder, how to help smokers to quit smoking, how to write hypnotherapy scripts, how to write hypnotic or tell hypnotic stories, and so how to make them therapeutic as well, how to do rapid inductions. So there's a whole load of courses that I've created, and obviously I've written 31 books now as well. I wrote my 31st book about 2 weeks ago, I think it came out, which was my 2 latest hypnotherapy books, Hypnotherapy Revealed books. So I'm writing a series of 10 Hypnotherapy Revealed books. There's an introduction to hypnotherapy and the Ericksonian approach. They're my most recent ones. And then back in August, I released the Bedtime Stories for Grown-Ups book. And I'm working on a bunch of other books at the moment. So I've got a lot of them. Yeah, that's okay. So I've got a bunch of them. And yeah, there is one that's the 6 parts in one video. That's the Dragons one. That's about the only video I've not scripted, but I think I showed when I was making it. I showed the sheet of paper. It's a small sheet of paper, but I showed the sheet of paper I used as my template for the 6 stories. And what I did was I just drew a map. So the template for the Dragon's Fire, the 6 Dragon's Fire stories, I got a small sheet of paper, kind of A5 size, quite size of my hand. Small sheet of paper. I wrote down the character names because I wanted to have characters in it, which I normally don't have characters with names in it. I wrote down the character names, and then I just divided the page into 6 sections and thought, right, there's going to be 6 stories. It's going to be an adventure from the beginning to the end. So where are they starting? So I just drew a little village on this piece of paper. I drew, I think, some mountains and some hills, and I drew some wasteland, and I drew all these different bits, and then I drew a big volcano at the top and thought, right, let's get to that volcano. And then all I had to do was ad-lib a story from the village. I had to think, okay, what happens at the start? Had to ad-lib a story from the village up to my line that I drew across the page. And then once I got there, then that would end that story. They'd fight a dragon. They'd win, obviously, because there has to be a second story. Then the second story would start once they move on to that kind of, they're now in the plains or wherever they are. And then, so the second story would start there. They would do the same. And then when I get to my line, so I literally, that was my script, was a sheet of paper and a kind of Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings style map I drew of what's in what places. So, for example, the volcano area was really hot, and there was lots of lava and very dark because there's a huge black cloud, plume of ash above them. Then before that, there's like an empty plain, like a desert area, and so I just had to tell a story through it all. Let's see. Yeah, in relation to my peers, I regularly get added to hypnotherapy groups on Facebook, and very quickly I end up unsubscribing myself to those groups because there's so much negativity in a lot of these groups. So not all of them, and obviously there's a lot of wonderful people out there who do therapy and stuff, Um, but there's also a lot of people who do it for the money and have totally the wrong attitude towards it. And that's something I find sort of quite difficult. I've stopped teaching live pretty much now. I think this year was the last time I taught anything live, earlier on this year. So I've stopped teaching live. I used to teach hypnotherapy diploma, and I used to teach it in my flat here, because I've got a bit of a library of therapy books, of about 1,500 books on hypnosis and therapy here. So I used to have everyone stay in a hotel on the seafront in a nearby town. And it's all obviously included in the price, but they'd stay in the hotel and every day they'd get shipped over here in a taxi, have lunch provided, an evening meal out provided at the end of each. It was done in 2 chunks. So at the end of each chunk, but by doing it in my own place, they were able to go and look at in my therapy library as it is, and flick through the books. Couldn't take anything away with them, but they could flick through the books, have a look, see if they like any of the books, and just have it, because a lot of the books are so expensive that you never know what to buy. You never know what's kind of, people say to me, what hypnotherapy book should I start with? And other than recommending my own, I normally don't recommend my own, but I point out I've written some because some people just don't realize. It's hard to know what someone should start with, because it depends what their interests are and what angle they take and what kind of personality they've got, because every hypnotherapy book is written obviously by someone from the perspective of that person. So you might resonate with an approach that one author has, but you may not resonate with an approach another author has, and yet both books might be equally as easy to read. But if you don't resonate with it and you don't quite get it, you know, their perspective, then it's just not going to work for you. It's not going to feel like it fits you and how you want to be working. So it's quite nice to let people have a look through my hypnotherapy books, and they get into one and think, oh, I actually quite like this book. It's really well written. It's easy written for how it's kind of resonates with how I view the world, and then they can buy that one. So yeah, so I do that. Anything else to reply to or comment on? Yeah, so for next year, it'd be really handy if people could share ideas of what you think you'd like to see me do with my channel. Something I've been working on, and the reason why I haven't got my 24,000 subscriber video story thing, I don't even know what story I'm going to do yet, but the reason I haven't got that out there yet is because I've been busy trying to edit videos and work on videos for a new channel. It's not a new channel. It's a channel I've had for a long time. It's a channel I just haven't done anything with for years. So it's a channel that has parenting and autism stuff on it, but not a lot. I think there's probably 6 videos or something. I don't know. Not many videos on it. But because at the time I had about 5,000 subscribers on this channel, I thought, I'll just work on one channel for now. So I just focused on this channel, was doing mainly my hypnosis stuff, and the occasional autism video, trying to start in sort of adding some autism videos in a bit more. And so I just stopped using the other channel. And because a lot of people have said, you know, we don't want you to do the autism videos, we want you to just do hypnosis videos. My plan is to just set up a channel for the autism videos, and those that want the autism videos, all my autism videos, obviously, that I've already posted will be on this channel, but the autism videos, I'll create a channel for it all. It'll be an Aspie Reacts channel. So the idea is that a lot of it will be me talking about different things, so reacting to how I respond to different situations, and how I think, and all these different things. But also I thought I might do a few reaction videos, because something that people comment on, that know me comment on, is my reactions to things. And so I thought it might be a more creative way of trying to show how I think about things by reacting to something. So the reason I thought about it was that I was saying to my wife, it's really annoying that when I'm in a supermarket or when I'm in a clothes shop or something, that I will reach that point where I'll freak out and think, no, I've got to get out of here. I'm overwhelmed. I need to leave now. And obviously I don't think what would be great is if I get my phone out my pocket now and turn the camera on and vlog this moment so that people can see how I react in this situation. That obviously never crosses my mind when I'm actually just reacting in that situation. So I thought, well, maybe if I react to something, like to videos, then that might be a way around that. So I don't know if it will work, but I know that when I sit at home and watch TV with my wife, I just won't get certain things that she'll get, and I will laugh at things she won't laugh at, and I'll cry at things that she won't cry at, and the fact that people say that autistic people don't have emotions and all that rubbish. So I thought it might be a good way of exploring autism and how autistic people can react to things. But then it means that I probably won't post so much over on this channel. So it's just trying to know what to do about the channels and what you lot want, because obviously you're the ones who make the channel. The subscribers are the ones who, if you all decide not to watch, then it doesn't matter what I post. So obviously I want to post what you want to see, but at the same time I want to post it as well, if that makes sense. So anything anyone wants to ask me, I'll probably hang around here for, if no one wants to ask me anything, obviously I'll just go, but if anyone does, I'm happy to hang around here for probably another 13 minutes or so. I have this thing about round numbers and liking things to be in nice cycles. Oh, is there a way I can remember lucid dreams? Lucid dreams are a funny one. I've got a video that some people don't quite get, even though I explain it all in the description and I explain it to some extent in the video itself. I've got a lucid dream video that's, I think, about 6 hours long. And some people have said, oh, it's 6 hours of nothing, you're cheating us. But it's not, and it explains in the description what it is. It's a 20-minute hypnosis bit that hypnotizes you, guides you to sleep, like a lot of my videos do. It helps to guide you to sleep, but it installs a trigger sound as well, which some people find the sound annoying, but the idea is it's a sound that you just wouldn't ordinarily hear. So it's not like just a familiar sound, something that your brain would think, oh, that's a unique sound to sort of hear. And so the idea is in the 20 minutes, I install that sound in you so that you're used to hearing, right, when you hear this sound, you'll become lucid and aware of your dreams. And then because we have a sleep cycle and I can only do that as a YouTube video, so I have to try and fit it to your cycle. What I do is I have that sound crop up at intervals that should match. If you've fallen asleep in time with my guiding you to sleep, then that should match roughly where you are in your sleep cycle, so that the sound sounds when you're dreaming in your sleep cycle. And the idea is that that then wakes you up a little bit, makes you lucid in your dream, and makes you a bit more likely to remember that as well afterwards. It essentially works the same way that lucid dreaming apps work, but a lucid dreaming app, you put your phone on under your pillow, and the sound in the app sounds when you stop moving. So that when you dream, when you drop into rapid eye movement sleep, your body gets paralyzed, and so that's the only time you stop moving while you sleep. The rest of the time you shift and shuffle about a little bit, even if you don't notice it that much. We all shift and shuffle about a bit. And so with the lucid dreaming apps, it rests on your pillow. When you become motionless, it waits a moment, and then it makes a little sound, and then that sound, you hear it, and it wakes you up very slightly, and you become lucid in your dream. And people don't quite get that necessarily about my YouTube video, that it's not an app, and so I have to make the video a whole night long, because it's not just sitting on your pillow. So having a trigger like that can help to remember lucid dreams. Dreams are generally meant to be forgotten. That's the idea of dreaming. And the other one is to wake yourself up slightly earlier than you normally wake up, and instantly think about what dreams you are having and what have you, or having a bit of a nap in the sort of afternoon or something, and then you might dream during that afternoon nap if it's about 20 minutes long. But the idea is, if you can wake yourself up just at the point where you've been dreaming or are just coming out of REM sleep, you're likely to remember the dream, as long as you focus on it straight away. If you don't focus on it straight away, it's easy to forget the dream, because the default setting with dreaming is to forget dreams. People who suffer with depression or with really bad anxiety or anything like that, they often remember their dreams more, because the dreams are often very emotionally charged, and they have a lot more of the night they spend dreaming. Because one of the symptoms of depression and severe anxiety is overthinking things which don't amount to anything. So that all these patterns get started. So you're worrying about this, and you're worrying about that, and you're worrying about this, and you're worrying about that. All these patterns get opened and they don't get closed. So your brain, when you dream, is trying to close all these patterns off that you've triggered through the day. It's a bit like constantly me sitting here at this computer, constantly opening Word documents every few minutes, and then wondering why the computer's running slow. And so then you get to the end of it, and you have to close all those Word documents and save them all. And that's what dreaming is. Dreaming is the closing and saving all the Word documents one after the other. So obviously that takes a lot longer if you've got a lot of documents open. The same with dreaming. You do a lot more of the night dreaming if you've got a lot of worries or a lot of overthinking to have to close off. So people who worry a lot often dream a lot. So let's see, more about autism and parenting. Yeah, one of my books is, I have a few of my books sitting next to me, is Asperger's Syndrome Tips and Strategies. That's tips and strategies for parents, carers, teachers, friends, employers, pretty much everyone, and those on the spectrum. So that's tips for all sorts of people. So the idea of it, that I wrote it, was because I'd written Look Into My Eyes, which is my autobiography, about what it's like to be autistic. And this book I'd written from birth onwards. So I wrote it chronologically. So I tried to think, how do I write the book? Do I write it around traits, autistic traits, or do I essentially tell my autobiography, tell my story, and say how those traits impacted on my life at different ages, from being a baby all the way through to being 40 years old. So that's what I did. And I then included, because I've had 20 years or so of professional experience working with people with autism and their families and friends and all the rest of it, I made sure that throughout all the chapters I was throwing in, so like as a toddler, so here's the challenges I faced, here's what would have helped, or here's what I think would have helped, and here's what definitely didn't help. And so I tried putting in lots of helpful stuff. My wife wrote a chapter. She wrote the final chapter of the book, because I was giving lots of talks on autism, and I'd get to the end of the talk and then say, right, anyone ask me questions now? And people go, you've just said you're married. How on earth does she put up with you? Because I've normally by then pointed out how irritating I can be and how rude I can be at times, because I not intentionally, but I'll just be blunt and I'll just be honest with people and not realize that they've taken offense to something. And so people were surprised. And I obviously said, I can't talk on behalf of anyone else. So only my wife can say what her experience is. And so she wrote a chapter in the book for me so that that was there for anyone else to see what it's like for someone who's in a relationship with someone who's autistic. Although one review in a journal pointed out that apparently I don't mention my wife's name. I don't know if I mention it at all, but that I don't actually acknowledge my wife until something like page 148, which I totally didn't realize. So that's not good. But it just didn't cross my mind. But then it is in chronological order, so I wouldn't necessarily mention her name or mention her when I'm talking about me as a teenager or me as a toddler or anything. But what a lot of parents were saying to me and some autistic people was it'd be really handy if all these tips that you've got throughout your book in your autobiography, if they were all in one place, because we find it really difficult to think, oh, I read somewhere, where was it that I read that? And they'd be then trying to find, say, a strategy that I developed that worked for me. They'd be trying to find that strategy and then they would struggle to find the page. And so I just wrote the book of tips and strategies. And I've done another book as well, which is on death, dying and loss. Do you feel that you're getting, it's just moved up the screen? Where's it gone? I feel that being autistic plays a part in my ability for storytelling. I've never seen it as a gift or anything. I've just seen it as it's logical. So because I can notice patterns, so how I do it when I'm not making videos here on YouTube, how I do it in say therapy sessions or wherever, is a client will sit there and they'll say, you know, my life's really chaotic. It just feels like I'm hurtling forward. I don't know whether I'm coming or I'm going. I just feel stuck in a rut. And they say all these things. And what they're doing is throwing out loads of metaphors back to back about things being chaotic, you know, backwards and forwards as a metaphor. A rut is obviously a metaphor. So they throw out all these metaphors. And so I then would take, say, the rut metaphor and I would turn that into a whole story. But on top of that, so that's how I get the story idea that I'm going to use. And then all I do is think, okay, so the rut metaphor, you say you feel like you're stuck in a rut. So you ask them, you know, what is it you want to achieve? They tell you a bit about the kind of life they want after they no longer have their problem. And then you see the pattern in the problem and in the solution, and you see how those patterns transition from the problem to the solution. And then I would take, say, the rut metaphor, and I would create a story with that pattern underlying it, but using the metaphors they've given me. So if they said about, you know, they just constantly feel like they're on a boat on rough water. Someone said something like that, not as badly as that, but someone said something like that. And again, I just then talked about going sailing and then finding calm water and being able to navigate the rough water and keeping control of the boat on the rough water until eventually they found land and found some calm water. And people don't notice that I'm using their metaphors and that I'm using their patterns, you know, that I've observed their patterns. So I have often said to parents when I've taught parenting courses for parents of autistic children that their kids would make brilliant therapists. And normally the parents almost unanimously say, no, my child would never be able to be a therapist. They can't socialize. They've got no communication skills, etc. But actually their child is brilliant at noticing patterns. And so assuming if their child happens to be able to learn. So not all autistic people obviously are have a high enough IQ to be able to learn well or anything, but those that do, they would make great therapists because they can learn the skills if they choose to. So that's kind of how I do that. That I will then take the pattern, get the story ideas from all the metaphors they've given me. So it makes the story personal to the client, and it makes that client really resonate with the story. They feel that there's something about it that makes it like it's their own, even though I'm the one telling it. And people always say this to me when I do this. People say, wow, that was such an incredible experience. I felt so drawn into it. It really resonated with me. It felt like somehow it was my own. It was part of me. And that's because it was. And I don't explain that to clients. I don't say, oh, well, that's because it was part of you. And I don't go and interpret everything for them. But it allows me to lay down all these patterns in a way that has the problem through to the solution for them. So that's kind of how I do that. And so that's why I can freestyle it, because to me, it's not like a difficult freestyling. It's, you've just told me what I need to say. You've just given me the metaphors. You've just given me the pattern. And in the same way that you can read 10 different crime novels, and each crime novel will be different, the chances are, if you look at the underlying pattern to those crime novels, they would all have the same pattern. They'd all have some kind of there is a problem with this. So, for example, I love The Mentalist, and obviously it's not on TV nowadays, but I love The Mentalist. And what they would do is they'd show about a minute or 2 minutes worth of footage. Then it would go to the title screen, and the titles would happen. By the time the titles happen on nearly every episode, I could tell you who the murderer was. If I couldn't tell you who the murderer was because I hadn't been on screen, I could tell you who the murderer was in terms of the type of person it's going to turn out to have been. And when they do crop up on the program, I'm able to say, that's the one I'm talking about. I could tell you how the murder happened, why the murder happened. All of that information is normally contained before the titles roll, in all the patterns shown and everything that's shown. So one difficulty with the fact that everything is actually the same kind of patterns underlying it all is that you know what to look for. Once you start doing this, you know what to look for. So you start recognizing, when you read books and things, you start recognizing, oh, there's the pattern for this. This is what's going to happen next. So you don't necessarily know the names of characters or anything, but you know where it's going. Oh, ASD and hormones. Where was that? Yeah, it's always difficult. See, when I was young, initially I didn't have any girlfriends when I was up until I was about 15, I think. Didn't even cross my mind, the thought of girls. It's not that I didn't find girls attractive or anything. I just didn't think about the idea of going out with a girl. It just didn't cross my mind. I would go and play with snails under a bush or something instead. And snails don't answer you back, and they don't disagree with you, and they don't talk to you. They just like slime up your arms and stuff. So snails are quite nice. And then I had a little circle of friends, not a close circle of friends, but just a few friends. We were kind of the outcast group. And one of them said, oh, I really want to go out with this girl. Would you mind going and asking her out for me? And so I thought it was a bit of an odd thing, but okay. So I walked over to her and said, will you go out with so-and-so? And she said, no. So I went back, no, she won't go out with you. And then another friend said, I'd quite like to go out with that girl. Same girl, but I'd quite like to go out with that girl. Will you ask her out for me? And so again, I walked over, will you go out with so-and-so? No, okay. Walk back, no, she won't go out with you. And then for some bizarre reason, one day I just thought, hang on, actually, I quite like her. I'm going to ask her out myself. But I don't like unknown situations. So I had to work out the variables. So I'm going to go and ask her out. I'm comfortable with the idea of walking up to someone and just asking them out bluntly, unlike my friends, it seemed. And so I'm just going to go and ask her out. But then I thought, but what if she says yes? What are you supposed to do? It's when I was asking her out for friends, if she said yes, I'd go back and say she says yes. If she says no, I go back and say she says no. But if it's me and she says yes to me, what is the next step? What am I supposed to do next? Am I supposed to say, okay, thank you, and walk off? What's my plan? So I had to work all that out, a pattern of exactly what behavior am I supposed to do. No one teaches you any of this stuff, in my experience. So I had to work out what I felt was a reasonable pattern of something to do. I then also had to work out what do you do if they say no, or they laugh in your face or whatever. So I had to work out what the plan is supposed to be for that. So I worked out all the patterns for all of this. And then one lunch break, I walked up. I had decided that my get out of jail thing was I'm going to ask her out about 1 minute before the bell goes at the end of lunch. So that if she says no, which was likely because she had said no to me about 3 or 4 times at this point in relation to my friends. So it was quite likely she was going to say no. So I thought, I'm going to go up 1 minute before the bell, ask her out. If she says no, then I'll say, okay, oh, there's the bell. I've got to go now. And I've got an excuse why I'm leaving, rather than just saying okay, but then not knowing, I've said okay, you don't want to go out with me, but is that the end of the conversation? Am I supposed to have more conversation? What's supposed to happen next? So rather than that awkward kind of bit, whereas previously it had been, okay, I'll go and tell the person, go and tell my friend, rather than that awkward bit, the bell would go and I would have to leave. She said yes, which totally threw me. So I kind of said, oh, okay, do you want to meet up? And just still got awkward because I actually genuinely didn't believe that was the option she was going to choose. So for me personally, having no social skills at that point in my life, and just walking up to people and being blunt if I needed to be, made it quite easy. And I just randomly, luckily, had someone say yes to me. But if they said no, then they would have just said no. I think the difficulty is when you're comparing yourself to others, or when you're trying to. Now, I do this with YouTube. I see other people and I think, how is their channel so popular? Look at them, look at what they're doing, and look at how, there's some YouTubers that have similar-ish channels, and I think they're posting all the time about all their merch. How are their subscribers growing at an alarming rate where mine aren't, and all they post about every video is, have you got my latest merch? Have you got my latest merch? So I compare myself to others, just like everyone does. And then you can get annoyed and get yourself down about it. But really, there's not, other than learning communication skills and learning different strategies, I don't recommend tricking people into dating you. So one thing you can do, which is what I don't recommend, is obviously you can use things like hypnosis, and you can make people feel really good around you, and make people want to go out with you. The trouble with something like that is it's entirely based on manipulation. And at some point, if you think, actually, it'd be quite nice if this was a relationship, you have to be the real you. And it's better to be, I like Richard Bandler. He's the founder of NLP. I like Richard Bandler's thing of, you just walk up to someone, say, will you go out with me? If they say no, you move on, and then walk up to the next person that you think you might want to go out with. So I know that's quite a blunt sounding thing, but the idea that when you end up going out with someone, it means that the person you go out with, a relationship was formed. So you had some commonality somehow. Maybe they thought, oh, I quite like them. So yeah, you walk up to someone, and the problem I have, even as an adult, I'm 40 years old, and I can't start conversations, and that is pathetic. A 40-year-old who's spent his working life, obsessing about communication skills, teaching communication skills, and yet you dump me at an event and I'm sat in the corner isolating myself. I went to a YouTube event, and it was a networking event. Went to a YouTube networking event where you're supposed to try and find people to collaborate with and things like that. I sat in a corner, didn't talk to anyone, and then went home. So I made a 2-hour journey to London to sit in a corner of a room to then make a 2-hour journey home. And I was so angry with myself when I was going home, thinking all I had to do was talk to someone. And I couldn't figure out how you start a conversation. But what I'm good at is keeping conversations going if needed when it starts. If I get bored, I will shut conversations down and say, oh, this is boring. But if it's really important, that I try and keep a conversation going. And I had this when I met Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart. That a friend of mine came with me to a show, and I can't start conversations, but she is incredible at starting conversations. She just walked up to the cast and started a conversation. I think one of them was smoking or something. Not one of those two. Another member of the cast was smoking. And she went up to, oh, do you have a light? And struck up a conversation. But her thing was that she can start a conversation, but then she doesn't know what to do next. My thing, I instantly found that this actor was into horses, and I started telling the story about how my mum had taught Laurence Olivier to horse ride because Laurence Olivier had been asked, as actors do, oh, there's this part available. You need to be able to horse ride. Can you horse ride? If you can do the part. So he said yes. And then thought, okay, I suppose I've got to learn to horse ride now, because he couldn't horse ride. And so I obviously told the whole story about that to this guy and struck up, carried on the conversation, and had hours of, well, about an hour or so of talking to the cast and crew, because I could keep the conversations going and keep people interested. Whereas my friend could start a conversation but couldn't keep them going. So my problem is starting them. But you can learn different conversation starters, I say, given that I've not mastered them and I'm 40. But it's stuff that you have to actively go out and learn, and not compare yourself to others, and expect that you're going to get rejected by all the wrong people. You know, rejection just means that person wasn't right for you. I saw something somewhere. Sorry. Oh, I'd love to have a degree in quantum physics. Yeah, my default setting, if my wife and I ever split up, so my friends, my wife, they all know this. If my wife and I ever split up, I'd just go and move to the woods. I wouldn't do YouTube. I wouldn't write. I wouldn't do any of that. I'd go and live in the woods because, yeah, it's look into my eyes. That's the title of my autobiography. I'm answering a question because I'm reading a question while I'm talking about other things. Yeah, my default setting is to disappear off into the woods and to isolate myself from society and from the world. And it wasn't until my dad died, and I think my dad was probably autistic, although he was obviously never diagnosed. He had no one. I was looking after him. He died of cancer, and I was looking after him, going and visiting him every single day in the last few months of his life. And it wasn't until he was dying that I realized that there is a downside to isolation and having no friends and not having any contact with family or anything. Until he died, I'd assumed that I can't imagine anything better than having no friends, no family, and just living on your own in the woods, in the dark, where you've got no sensory, kind of extreme sensory input, where you can just focus on the subjects you love, and the subjects are your life, and that's it. I couldn't see a downside to that until I saw my dad dying of cancer and realized that if it wasn't for me, my brother couldn't cope with my dad dying. He found it too traumatic and too emotional to see my dad wasting away, whereas that didn't bother me in the slightest. You know, that's life. People die, and sometimes it doesn't look pleasant. So I didn't get emotional about that and didn't get phased by that. I just went and cared for him as best as I could until he died. But my brother couldn't do that, and that he didn't have a circle of friends or anything, and he didn't have any other family. So, and the family he did have, he'd rejected, so he hadn't seen for decades. So it was only then that I realised, having people in your life can have a positive benefit, but I'm always fighting that kind of psychological urge to disappear off and hide in the cave somewhere and shut myself down from the world, not socialize, not communicate with people and interact with people, not write books, not do YouTube. I'm always fighting the urge to stop doing all these things, because all these things put me out of my comfort zone. My wife makes tents in the living room here. She makes tents for me. She'll like make tents under the dining room table, or she'll make tents with the sofa and the chairs, so that I've got places I can go and hide in, little dens I can go and hide in when I'm really overwhelmed and struggling with the world. So I can understand the idea of, you've got a degree in quantum physics and yet you can't function in the world, and that's really hard. But there is a lot that, if you do know as a parent, which is what I want to try and help, if you do know as a parent things you can do to facilitate and help someone learn certain things, then they can achieve a certain amount. It may not be kind of an automatic thing. It may not be their default setting, how they feel inside themselves of what they want to do, but you can help people to get to that kind of place. Yeah, female autism has always interested me. I say always, it hasn't always interested me. It's always interested me since I realised that not so many females are diagnosed as males. Because to me, that's stupid. Because the females that I meet that I think you're autistic probably number the same kind of percentage as males. And ironically, if you do a search, say on Amazon, for autism books by autistic people, most of the autism books are by female people who are autistic, not by males. So ironically, more males get diagnosed autistic than females, and yet when you try and find a book by someone who's autistic about what it's like to be autistic, nearly all of them are by females, not by males. But I think that females have just as high rates of autism as males do, and I think that eventually the research will show that. It's just that a lot of the people that do the research haven't been identifying it. They've been looking at the wrong place. I think they don't notice. They focus on, oh no, they're coping in this situation, and then they don't realize that just because you're coping in a situation doesn't mean that you're not struggling in a situation. Yeah, when I was diagnosed autistic as an adult, I was diagnosed as autistic as an adult. The term came in mid 1990s for Asperger's. Autism prior to that had largely been associated with low functioning, or see, I'm not a fan of the term high functioning and low functioning, because that relates specifically to the IQ as opposed to relating to autism itself. And so I think it's misleading, because it kind of, mainly because people say to me, oh, high functioning, that means you don't struggle, you don't have problems, you're just a little bit autistic. And I don't like the idea of, when people say, oh, you're a little bit autistic, then you're not really properly autistic. Because it kind of says you don't have the same problems, you don't struggle. So in the textbooks, the definition is that the low functioning is you've got low IQ, the high functioning is you've got higher, average or higher IQ. But most people, I'd say, even recently, would think autism is this thing where people are mute and not talking not able to say much. If they're not mute, they're not able to say much, and they struggle a lot with communication. They're not particularly bright. They need constant 24 hours, 7-day a week care, all that kind of stuff. It seems to have been associated with that. And then when Asperger's came out as a term, obviously it took about 5 to 10 years for that to filter down from being in the diagnostic medical manual all the way down to the teachers in the schools knowing the term and knowing what it meant and all that stuff. So that's 2005-ish, something like that. So the diagnosis wasn't really, no one was going to pick it up when I was in school. If you look through my school reports, clearly they noticed, but no one picked it up because there was no diagnostic term. So it's a similar thing. The son being 30, there just wasn't the information to be had. You couldn't research it yourself, really. You didn't know what you were expected to research because you've got to know a bit about what it is to know what to research. Nowadays, it's a bit easier because you can kind of look at symptoms and online, and everyone self-diagnoses stuff. So it's much easier to find information, and people are more tech savvy nowadays. Yeah, so you have to essentially, even now, I know parents who have to look up the information for themselves, and the parent themselves is the one that's telling everyone else, this is what they've got, this is how I know, this is what the traits are, and you have to put in so much work, but not every parent has that. And obviously one thing I try to do and would love more awareness of doing it, that is what I would like more of my autism videos watched, is to try to help people, especially parents, when they're searching for this kind of information. What do you look for? And for example, I've helped parents through the going and seeking diagnosis. You have to go to your doctor in a very specific way to get the diagnosis. You can't just go and say, I think they might be autistic, can they get checked? So if the doctor just writes to the specialist, parent thinks the child's autistic, can you do an assessment? The assessors will reject it and won't even look at it, whether the child's autistic. So they could be autistic, but the assessor will not look at it because there's no evidence in the letter. So parents need to know that they need to tell the doctor, you need to put this information in your letter to the specialist, so that when the specialist reads the letter, the specialist reads, child struggling at school with this, this, and this, child struggling at home with this, this, and this. That sounds like autism. They need to read that in the letter, because or else they won't call you in for a diagnosis. At least that's what it is here in the UK in many areas. You can seek private diagnosis, but then there's a lot of places that won't accept private diagnosis, because there are some doctors that will just give a diagnosis because it was paid for. You've paid for the private diagnosis, so you've got that paid diagnosis. So if they have suspicions and they think that you've gone and got it paid for, they've got a right to refuse that, the legitimacy of that diagnosis. The school does, and so they might not get funding for you, or benefits. People can refuse to issue benefits in relation to the child because they can say, we don't believe the diagnosis because it's not a National Health Service diagnosis. So you have to kind of think about that as well. But then obviously National Health Service diagnosis can take a few years, up to a few years, to get the appointment and to get the diagnosis. So it can be a long process. My experience is that if lots of professionals think your child is definitely autistic, but it's going to take years to get them through the National Health Service to get the diagnosis, but we want to be able to have the funding and implement changes now, because all the professionals around that family are keen for the diagnosis as well. You don't have so many barriers. People take it seriously because everyone already agrees. It's just a matter of paperwork. It's just a matter of getting that in writing that they're autistic. Yeah, sorry to hear that. That's I'm trying to see. I have spoken before on my channel about me becoming depressed and suicidal, and I wrote in my mobile phone. This was 2015. I wrote in my mobile phone a date to kill myself because I was facing a lot of discrimination. I was really struggling with life because of being autistic and not being able to get any support or taken seriously, and felt very trapped. And so thought, well, logically, the only way out is to kill myself. And obviously, this had my wife very upset about all of this. But it didn't even cross my mind so much about my wife as such. So obviously, I care about my wife, but it was about, I was focused on me and how can I end my pain and suffering. I wasn't focused on, my brain would just say, well, it's okay for them. They still live and can carry on with their lives. It's not a problem to them because it's only you ending your life. It's not you ending their life. So it's not a problem to them. So my brain would kind of tell me this story that it's only hurting me if I kill myself. And after I've killed myself, it's not hurting me because I'm dead. Luckily, circumstances changed and just random events happened, and the random events meant that I didn't end up killing myself, but I had a date and a time for when I was going to do it, and I knew how I was going to try and do it. But it's one of those things that unfortunately actually happens quite a lot among autistic people. And again, that was part of writing some of my books, was to share that story and to try and say, look, these sort of issues need to be addressed sooner. But I was facing workplace trouble. I was really struggling in work and there was nothing I could do about it. So let me just try and go through these. I'll have to end soon, but I said I was going to end at 1 hour. It's now 1 hour 27. And what I really like is that many of you are helping each other as well and offering responses to each other over here at the side. In school, I had the issue of I normally knew the work perfectly fine. So the whole under challenged thing. Bullying just confused me. People would push me over and I'd stand up and walk away and just carry on walking. And then they'd push me over and I'd stand up and carry on walking. Then they'd push me over and I'd stand up and carry on walking. And they'd think, well, that was boring. And they'd walk away. So a lot of the bullies gave up bullying me because I couldn't understand why they were pushing me over and I just carried on walking. Luckily, maybe just my personality or something, I just didn't retaliate. It didn't cross my mind to retaliate. I was a very small child. I was born in August. So that means that for school years, I was one of the youngest in the class all the time. And so I was also one of the smallest in the class. And so people would, I was an easy target. But I'm also generally quite a calm person. Things obviously make me anxious and stuff, but I can keep myself to myself. And so if I had responded to the bullying when I was pushed over, if I'd responded by trying to fight back, that would have made it worse because they would know they could beat me up easily. They would know that although I'm trying to fight, it's not really a threat. It just makes it fun for the bully because they know that it's an easy fight. It's an easy win. If I had acted scared and been scared, again, they'd go, "Oh, you're scared," and they would feed off of that. So giving either of those responses leads to bullies feeding off of it. They feed off of the anger if you get angry. They feed off of the fear if you get scared. But indifference, they have no idea how to respond to it, in my experience. And so it reasonably quickly led to bullies not even bothering to bully me. But that's probably more just my mentality, that I was so kind of confused by this idea that you'd push someone over. It just didn't cross my mind that they were bullying me at the time. Yeah, people didn't know types or what autism was. And I now just say, I intentionally say I'm autistic. When I was diagnosed autistic, not Asperger's, but I started by using the term Asperger's because that was the popular term. Everyone knew what it was. So I was told in my assessment, you would have what used to be diagnosed as Asperger's, but it's now just all autism spectrum disorder, which I already knew because I had been working in this kind of environment for years. And one thing was that everyone knows it as Asperger's, but then they changed the diagnosing to that term doesn't exist anymore. It's all autism spectrum disorder. So I thought, well, part of my role, because I can do YouTube and stuff, should be just to talk about being autistic, because then people challenge you and say, you're autistic. You don't come across as autistic because you're, you're intelligent and you're able to talk. And, so it opens up a dialogue. That was my thinking, was it opens up a dialogue. People have to start exploring it and understanding it a bit more. And so that was kind of why I chose to just constantly say I'm autistic, rather than sticking. I know some people have stuck to they've got Asperger's, even though now the diagnosis technically doesn't exist. And I just think that because no one will be diagnosed with Asperger's nowadays, it means that people don't quite know what, when it's autism, it sounds worse, I think, for parents, because they think, oh, if it's that Asperger's one, that'd be okay. But autism, that sounds really bad. So it's just, I prefer the idea of just putting it in people's face and saying, no, this is what I've got. This is how I am, and kind of deal with it. Ask me questions about it, and I will answer the questions bluntly and honestly to try and be as clear as I can about the experience. So anyway, let me just read the last few comments. Yeah, the social stuff definitely needs to be taught a lot more. I find that the social stuff as it's taught in schools and things is terrible. For me, learning hypnosis was where I learned all the social stuff, because it's not just about learning what a smile is versus a frown and all that rubbish. You want to know, you want to know the stuff that ordinary non-autistic people do automatically, like noticing changes to facial color. Non-autistic people notice that automatically. Autistic people should be taught to notice it. I look for the pulse here. I notice changes to facial color. I look for eye movements, where someone's focusing their eyes, as well as things like smiling and body posture and body position and hand gestures. And I try to read all this information and figure out what's going on inside for the person based on all that information. Things like muscle tenacity, like how tense or relaxed are different muscles. And my thing was, what is the little circle on a sheet of paper for the smiley face and for all the rest of it, but what is, if I was looking at a person, what is the non-verbal cues that let me know this person's angry, depressed, happy, whatever the emotion is. So that's what I taught myself, and I still get it wrong, but I get it more right than I would do if I didn't teach myself. But all that kind of learning comes from things like hypnosis. It's not really taught, unfortunately, in schools. But that's the kind of thing that needs to be taught, really in-depth kind of observation skills, really. And the good thing about a lot of autistic people is they have very good observation skills when it's something they're interested in. So I'm completely blind to things I'm not interested in. I remember I was going out with somebody, and we were out somewhere, and this woman started flirting with me, and I was completely oblivious to this. But the person I was going out with was very angry that I was carrying on this conversation with this person who was clearly flirting. That's when I was like 19 or something. And I totally just didn't notice it. Didn't cross my mind that kind of information. And yet I can walk down a road and see a frog from 100 meters away, and think I'm going to get my phone and take a photo of that. So I can notice some things, but not others. I have to really work hard at teaching myself. So I'm going to round up this video here. Thank you everyone who's popped in and said hello and commented, and thank you all for interacting with each other at the side as well, and helping each other, and giving sort of ideas and interacting with each other in a positive way. And I look forward to seeing you on my future videos. I'm happy to do more live videos if people find it interesting. The challenge is trying to find a time that suits everyone, because I think I've got annoyingly, I have a lot of followers in California area. The second most popular place is New York, so there's a bit of a gap there. Third most popular place is, I think it's Texas or something really weird. It's like sort of a place that I wouldn't necessarily expect to suddenly have popularity. And then the UK. So it's kind of jumps all over New Mexico. So it jumps all over the place. So it's trying to find a time zone when I can be live for like an hour or something and just chat and answer questions that people might have if anyone's interested in asking any questions and having them answered. It's trying to find a time when I can do that. It's also quite difficult to follow all the questions sometimes, especially if I'm trying to, if I scroll back, because then obviously more pop up down below, and then I have to, when I start scrolling, it jumps to the bottom, and then I have to try and scroll back to where I last saw. But I'm happy to do live videos. I've talked before about the idea of doing, Yorkshire's a bit closer, well, compared to America at least. I've talked about doing live videos like once a week or something, quite often, but it's always been kind of, what's the time to do it? Sort of UK time, what's the time to do it? I'm often happy doing almost any time, but it's a time that suits people from California essentially through to, there are people that watch in Dubai and Israel and places like that as well. So it's very difficult when you've got a worldwide audience, but most of my audience is US. So, and obviously I'd like to have a few more followers in the UK, would be quite nice, but most of them US. So anyway, I'm going to go now. Thank you for joining me here, and thank you for liking and following my stories and all my other videos. I will see you later.